And welcome to the Counter Defense Podcast, where every week we sit down with VCs, CEOs, and security executives to have honest conversations on what it needs and what it takes to win the infinite game of cybersecurity. So every Friday morning we sit down and we have our Insights edition. It's a weekly live conversation on the state of cybersecurity. Each week, James and I have a frank, action-oriented conversation about what's important in security, what to do about it, and how we can protect what matters most. So welcome to the future of cybersecurity. Pioneering solutions, transformational technology, and inspirational leaders. I'm your host, Connor Sherman, and this is the Confident Defense Podcast. So let's get into it. It's going to be an exciting day of the week. So James, tell me, how was that? Was that smooth? Was that good?
What a blockbuster event you just put on there.
I know.
Just a round of applause.
Fantastic. Cool. So we are live. We're going to have some fun with this today. I wanted to kick us off talking about Microsoft. So the U.S. has joined England in accusing China of going after and hacking Microsoft and perpetrating these hacks. A lot of the attacks are centered on like phishing campaigns and breaking, kind of normal stuff. But what they're going after are the U.S. companies in the back end. What I found interesting about this, I think why this is so important, is this building theme. And James, I want to get your opinion on this. Cybersecurity is less technological. It's quickly becoming political. And it always kind of has been, but I think it's becoming an instrument of politicians. And so in this particular case, the Biden's administration did not produce any sanctions against China like they did with Russia. But they did give a very stern warning, and so they have made it a firm topic of conversation, whereas in previous years they would have danced around it. So so I think, again, for me, when I walk away at this, I'm like, okay, Biden's administration didn't actually do anything to solve the problem other than firmly make this a political topic that they'll talk about in the next time him and Xi Jinping sit down for coffee. I don't know. James, what was your thought or take on this?
I mean, isn't this what I guess national leaders do with every topic? I mean, I guess the context is, okay, it's cybersecurity, but it could have been anything, right? Like, this is their playbook. This is what they do. Okay, we'll politicize it, and then it will be up for the people out there to interpret whether or not we're doing a good enough job. I brought it up, so therefore I'm doing something, right? It is a kind of I don't know, a song and dance rather than, I just don't see like tangible action being happening at any point in, like, let's just say, like, the near future, because with what you just said, right, like, they need to come back to this and they need to discuss it and whatever, right? And I don't know this, right? I guess it's a anecdotal or I guess hypothetical, but what have they done in the past? This is like, so cybersecurity hasn't just appeared out of nowhere, and like China and data breaches. You do that, put those two words in Google, right? Like this has been a prevalent problem for decades at this point. Anyway, all that's really, I guess I just like spun my wheels there, but okay, great. They'll talk about it. This is no different than like tariffs or any of the other stuff that has always been a problem that you're just going to politicize it. So.
Yeah, I get the politicized thing. Here's what I think is interesting. This is also coming off the heels of China doing two things. One, China, we talked about this last week on the show. China, the cybersecurity administration within China, who monitors and maintains the Great Firewall of China, they have gone through and said, if you're going to be a Chinese company that is listed in a U.S. stock exchange, you have to go through a security health check. right? And basically what they don't want is they don't want there to be a breach event where then the US and US authorities have to step in, and that gives the US a leg into a Chinese company. They want to try and prevent that. That's Connor's read on it. So again, this is China saying, okay, we're looking at cybersecurity from a very political perspective, like how does this affect our national security and this, that, and the other. And then we'll talk about this a little later, but actually let's dive into it now. China has a new law which says you have to disclose your 0-day vulnerabilities to the Chinese government first before you do anything else. Otherwise, you're in violation and there's jail time and fines and so on and so forth. So again, it's just like...
what? Is that so they could go leverage them ahead of time? Like, what?
I totally think the answer is yes, right? I really think it's just like, hey, instead of us doing our research and coming up with our own 0 days with our Ministry of Security Defense or whatever, whichever the organization is, it's like, let's just get all these researchers and make sure they don't get paid for their research. They disclose it to us, and then we use it in the attack. So that would be the black hat thinking of that scenario. But yeah.
I'm trying to find the right analogy there. I get, because like the researchers, that's IP, right? That they've like work and then like intellectual property that they've produced. I guess on the work front, because if you're a gold miner, I've mined the gold. Okay, you got to pay. You go to turn it in to get cash, right? And then the government takes money like a tax. But in this case, it is as if they're like, okay, I'm taking all of your gold, right? Like, in some, I don't know what percentage is the right one here. Maybe 90%. You're taking that kind of away from the researcher in a way. So that's that's tricky.
It's gonna be it's gonna be an interesting one. Again, I think what we're just seeing here is this sense of like but again, this is all coming on the heels of we've had all these ransomware attacks, right? In the US. And I think the entire world has seen that this is no longer okay to allow cybersecurity to be an ignored topic. Like, it's taking down huge sections of our commerce, huge chunks of our economy. So, and there's real ramifications to this. So everyone's just kind of like woken up to this. And I think it started with Sunburst, I think with SolarWinds, and then we saw the meatpacking went down, and then Colonial Pipelines. I think it's just come to a head, right? I think that's just kind of the state that we're in, and everyone has said, okay, enough is enough. Or more like, the opportunity for more political leverage is here. Let's go exploit it. It's probably the reality of it.
Yeah. I guess like I really wish I had the time to do the research on like the number of security events or breaches by, I guess, geolocation or country that make the news, right? Like that become newsworthy. And I would suspect that an increase in cybersecurity news events, increase over time would lead to this type of like these types of actions being taken. And I feel like this is a natural course of like, things happening, right? Like, I guess if there's enough oil spills because, oil tankers out of Peru or whatever, enough people are going to be like, what the heck? Why isn't anybody doing something about it, right? Anyway, you get where I'm going with that, hopefully.
Yeah, I get it. I think it's something there. Yeah. So I'll just wrap up this section by saying the diplomatic goal, as stated by the New York Times, and yes, I am elitist. I read the New York Times. American officials have said is to get China, Russia, and other players to agree to have a set of guardrails of behavior, not arms control, which I think was kind of smart because it's impossible to do arms control on the internet, which would be impossible to verify in a world invisible with reproducible cyber weapons. But an accord on what kind of targets and behaviors would be prohibited. So forcing a conversation, focusing on guardrails, basically, I'm glad the conversation is happening. Make sure critical infrastructure and hospitals are off limits, and elections are off limits all the time. And then if we really need a world where we find it's important to be just, kicking each other in the shin all day long, fine. Keep it to the commercial, keep it to the into the the military industrial complex. Keep it over there, so at least there's enough money to insure the problem, and then leave the real people alone and let them go to their doctors and let them vote and get food without political warfare via cyber events disrupting it. So that's my very inarticulate way of saying, if you're going to have a fight, please put some guardrails around it, because the rest of us are trying to get on with the rest of our lives and defend the companies we work with.
Oh, it's like the scene from Anchorman where all the news channels come together for a big brawl, and they're like, no
Yes.
no face and hair or whatever. Yeah.
That's right. Yep. That's okay, dude. So let's dive into this one, which is more technical and more fun. Definitely more your neck of the woods. So talk to me about Aruba networks.
So Alpha Security, I believe, were the research. Yeah, Alpha Security was the researchers here. I'm gonna mess up names yet again here, but Gal Zror and Itai Greenhut. I'm so sorry if I've mispronounced those names, but
you did. You definitely did.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. And listen, like people mispronounce my name all the time. I can empathize. Stinks that I can't seem to read.
Wait,
but
it's not Jimmy Ciabatta. I thought
it could be. Yeah, it certainly could be. So this is the Portswigger write up on it. But if you scroll down, there's a link to the actual write up that the two researchers did. Basically, they were like, the story is they're sitting in their office one day and they looked up at the ceiling and noticed that there was access points manufactured by Aruba that provided them network access, and then they began to wonder, are we truly secure? Like who doesn't have that thought, right? Should we do something to ensure our privacy? So, long story short, they found, I believe, 8 vulnerabilities that they were able to chain together and get unauthenticated. I believe command execution is what they were able to do. And these conversations happen all the time in practice, at least my world, where it's like, well, what vulnerabilities should we care about, and what infrastructure should we look at? Everything matters, I guess is the end of the story. But until I guess the big takeaway for me, right, is it's not real until it's real. So that's why I really like these efforts and these research efforts that do end up chaining a bunch of vulnerabilities together to get one really bad situation, so to speak. And it's not bad in the sense of like, oh my gosh, with massive data breach here, they followed the vulnerability disclosure guidelines. Aruba patched everything, the firmware updates, everything was hunky dory on that front. But in the sense of like, okay, the criticality was critical, right? It was severe. We'll put hopefully please do link this in the show notes for any vulnerability researchers out there, tech nerds, whatever. If you want to read through this, they have like example code and all sorts of stuff, demos. I really found it fascinating. That this is what I do for a living. So very cool. What are your thoughts in terms of like vulnerability chaining and like how to deal with one, your vendors, and then two, is vulnerabilities in general, like in terms of patch prioritization, right? Like, how do you see, Connor, in the real world, an effective prioritization mechanism? Like, how does that work for you? Just interested to get your thoughts on that.
Don't ask me real questions on a live show. What? No, I need to be prepped. I need to.
Not to put you on the spot, but like, how would you patch this? Yeah.
So here's what I think is interesting here. I'm going to echo what you said, partly because it's true and partly to buy myself some time. But I really like what you said, that these efforts really show you that when an adversary is persistent, they don't have to leverage the easy, low-hanging fruit. They can do vulnerability chaining. I think there's the file injection, and then there was a handful of things here. I'm not going to try and rattle off. The doc does a much better job than what I would pair it to do. It was really cool. Here's my thing though. Most of us in the real world, not the real world, but most of us who are defending companies are still trying to have conversations about getting things patched consistently and automated such that, hey, I would be super happy if every organization I walked in to help, I ensured that if we walk away and there's no criticals ever being deployed into runtime, like, yes, that is a good step. Most companies can't hold that line. So I think what this does show us in a very clear sense is that as security leaders, we need to have that sense of pragmatism. Okay, while you can do chained vulnerability to do this thing, the adversary is going to go for the easy stuff. So let's go get rid of the criticals. Okay, you handle the criticals, good. Let's go handle the highs, which are with remote execution, right? And then that are unauthenticated. So go handle the criticals and the highs and work your way down the pipe. But it also shows us that you can't lean on fixing the problem up front. You won't fix it fast enough because the bench of work is so deep that literally the amount of time it would take you to get there, the adversary can just skip over and just do a bunch of mediums and lows, and voila, they're in the environment. So, I think, that's kind of, I know that's not my precise answer, but that's kind of where I'm thinking about this. It's like, don't not hold the line on fixing criticals, but just remember that in this cat and mouse game, we are not doing the Queen of Hearts thing. There's this mathematical formula we talk about the Queen of Hearts. Anyways, like as one progresses, as you progress forward, the adversary progresses forward, and or co-evolution where the rabbit gets faster, so the fox gets smarter, right? That type of thing. We're just not even in that game. It's like the adversary is so better positioned than we are. The best thing I can think of is, as most defenders, you're a zebra in a herd. That's like literally the best defense you have, is that the guy next to you is probably going to get eaten by a lion just through sheer numbers. And that's the unfortunate state of security that I think we're in.
Well, I got the correct answer here. Yeah, and the correct answer is have a holistic security program that includes alerting and monitoring and incident response. You can't patch everything. You need to have central logging and alerting, and you need to monitor stuff, especially like in light of the conversation we were just having about 0-day reporting in China. Well, these could have been 0 days that were found through Chinese research. Right. And then leverage. We were talking about ground rules. Don't go after hospitals and stuff. Well, Aruba is a piece of enterprise infrastructure that is deployed in airports and hospitals and universities. Right. So that's why this is relevant. That's why this is important. The full kind of complement of both of these topics that we've been talking about. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
And this is why. Okay, so this is what I was alluding to earlier. China's new law requires vendors to report 0-day bugs to the government. When I did my best to read the original source, which was through Google Translate, and certain things get lost in translation there, I believe it also applied to everyone who comes across 0 days. So it's not just vendors. Here is the biggest problem I have with this, is that you do two things. Whenever you squash something, it tends to not go away. It just tends to go underground, right? It just tends to, people are still going to find 0 days. If you're telling them that we can't publicly disclose them in a responsible way, they're still going to go, okay, fine. Those go underground, they'll sell into the highest bidder. And then it just doesn't solve the problem. It just goes away. So it just goes underground, and then you can't regulate it. You can't have an open, transparent conversation about how we want to handle these things. So that's my number one complaint about this. And then to your point, it's great. Now we've found a 0-day in hospital critical infrastructure for power, electric, hospitals, elections, food production. If you don't talk about that and work with the technology partners to handle that and patch it and go through a reasonable response, somebody else will find it, and then somebody else will exploit it with nefarious purposes. This kind of reminds me of the whole free bugs movement, if you will, however many years ago that was, 15 years ago, free bugs, and where researchers were doing all this work, and then vendors, then the Microsofts and all them of the world were like, thanks, we'll fix it, bye-bye. And they're like, wait, I did all this work, I want to be compensated for it. And so that became the whole thing, which then cascaded into the 0 days for sale market and so on and so forth. I'm going to plug a really cool book here. So Nicole Pelroth, wrote a really cool book. This is how they tell me the world ends. It actually has a far more beautiful cover on it, but I always remove the covers from my books because I'm weird. But this is how they tell me the world ends, and she goes through the whole thing, and there's a really great story behind it. So if you really care about like the history of 0 days and that whole universe, check out that book. But I got on a tangent. All I'm saying is if you squash it and put it underground, you don't solve the problem. Does anybody disagree with me? There's a few people on LinkedIn chat. If you disagree with me, let me know. There's like 2 or 3 people commenting already. So yeah, let me know if you disagree with me. But I think that pushing things underground doesn't solve the problem. It just creates more of a problem. Yeah, I think we've hit that one. But James, any other notes?
No, I think I'm good on my end.
Okay, so again, Hacker News is awesome. So I'm going to go with another Hacker News article. Enough said. New critical SolarWinds 0-day vulnerability under active attack. This is it's a couple weeks old now, so it's been under attack for a while. This is all I want to say is this. We're not going to solve any of these problems by rushing out and throwing buckets of water on a house fire. Got to build a process for detecting and fixing these problems and whatever that is. Because while it's so much fun sometimes to pick on these big companies like SolarWinds and Kaseya and others, like, oh, look at them. We're all just as guilty as the next person. They just happen to be huge supply chain companies, and they're under attack from nation-state-funded adversaries. So if you're a defender, just think in systems, not in projects. That's kind of like the big shift. Think of it as like if you're doing vulnerability management, you just need to have this as we need to have a process for handling 0 days. We need a process for being able to deploy patches to critical environments in under 24 or 72 hours. Take your pick. And then also have the right partners in place to tell you when you are being attacked by something that you yourself can't see. You know, I think you said it earlier, James. A holistic security program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're good there.
I wonder, I don't know anybody at the SolarWinds cybersecurity team there, but I can't imagine like the level of investment and I guess like resourcing that they may or may not now have available to them over the past 12 months. The problem is like you can't what you just said, right? You can't necessarily build maturity to the extent you know where you're one step ahead of like APTs in 12 months. Maybe you can. I don't know. I guess I don't want to take a completely closed-minded approach to that, but like I'd imagine it'd be pretty hard because you got to find resources, you got to bring them in, you probably have to do staff augmentation, get them up to speed. There's so many things that you need to do that we're not. I think we're only 8 or 9 months post that breach or whatever. So I don't know. I'm just curious. I just like would be curious to be a fly on the wall, and they're like their weekly like security powwows or whatever.
I don't know, James. You're a delicate soul. I think there's a lot of adult words being used in those powwows.
I know, my sensitive ears. It certainly could be that way.
Okay, cool. So here's what I was really excited to see. So thank you for The Verge for making life that much more spicy. So 19 days after ReEvil's ransomware attack on Kaseya, the customers who are using VSA, there's a fix. Magically, out of nowhere, a third party has shown up and given Kaseya a decryptor for all of their for all the people that they got locked up through their ransomware. Now, if you remember from last week, we talked about this, and obviously, if you were on the news at all, you understood that when my father-in-law is telling me cybersecurity news, it's a big deal. So that ReEvil just like went dark, right? Biden sat down with Putin and said, fix the problem or I'm going to fix it. And then like a week later, ReEvil is just gone, website's down, just disappeared. We don't know what happened. The general public does not have publicly disclosed information about what has happened. If you do happen to know what has happened, please DM me on LinkedIn. I'd be very interested to know. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they come up with a magical decryptor. So what I find interesting here is it's an anonymous third party. So So I love this little bit from NBC, which was quoted by The Verge, and I'm like, thank you for not actually providing any information. But NBC says there are three options. Either it was the U.S. government, the Russian government, or they bought it directly from ReEvil. Like, thank you, NBC. They are the only three options exist. So thanks for paring that down for us. So it'd be interesting to see how the whole thing came about. I'm curious though, because they were advertising it, like that we have the software to do the decryption, this, that, and the other. Just pay us $70 million and then $50 million. So I'm curious if, like, through the raid process that I imagine took place, that one of the governments has found the object, done some bartering, if it was Russian government, or we've got it and we've given over to Kaseya, and they just cover that. Something I have no information. I think it's fascinating. At some point, there will be a dramatized Hollywood movie made after this whole episode, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Any thoughts or opinions on this, James?
None that are going to be incredibly productive. It's mainly about that NBC quote. Scroll back down.
There we
go. There you
go.
Okay, all right. This guy Kevin. So the news reporter Kevin here first reported the decryption tool's existence and speculates that one of the three sources. So like.
It's like, thanks, dude.
Do with what you will with that or whatever. I can't even compose a sentence. It's just like, why bother put that in there? Like, could it just been like, more information to come? Why do we need this guy's opinion on what it could be? Like, it seems pretty self-evident. I'm just gonna
James, why does anybody need our opinions? It's like, just because we have a good haircut, so we just
we've been doing this for a minute, man. Like, I don't know who this. I guess I should look him up. Maybe it's a ex cybersecurity person that's turned news reporter. I don't know, but I don't think speculation like that is particularly useful. I'd rather have an informed opinion, be like, according to such and such an expert. The most likely scenario is that. Blah, right? Though, and then preface it, though there are many things that are being considered, right?
Yeah.
Right. If you're gonna have like a loosey-goosey statement, at least have somebody with a reputation say something about it. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, do you go to a mechanic to like get advice on sports betting? Oh, yeah, maybe they'd be a good person for that.
That's probably the worst example you could have pulled up.
Forget it. Let's just move on.
Okay. It's like, mechanics have an opinion on who to vote for in the game.
Oh, okay. Fine. So being a midwife, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Oh, God, what are we doing? Okay, so let's do this. I think we got one thing left we want to touch base on today. And this is, I want to leave you with all a cheerful and happy note. MIT predicted in 1972 that society will collapse this century. New research shows that we're on schedule. Sorry, I meant to say not happy news. I dropped the negative there. So turns out, with unfettered progress for the sake of progress, where we just consume more planetary resources and don't heal the planet, and we do this with no sense of planning for the future, turns out it's a bad idea. So, great little article here on Vice. And this has nothing to do with cybersecurity. This is just more like, okay, this is the world we actually live in, right? This is the world that my son will be living in, and he's going to grow up in. And like, the world's on fire and this and the other. So there's a really cool article. It's a really cool data project behind it, and kind of just got the geek in me excited and depressed. And so the story here is in 1972, MIT did this data-driven analysis and effectively said, here are your line graphs of what the world's going to look like. If we do business as usual, here's our consumption, here's our food, here's and right, like this pivotless line right here is like, is 2040, so a couple of years from now, so it's like 30 years from now, and then we just start to have this significant decline. made all these big splash in the 1970s, and people were interpreting it and talking about it. And there's a book written about it and stuff. So anyway, someone who was going, so there, what is her name? Sorry, I apologize. So last name is Harrington. She works at KPMG. She was working on her master's thesis, according to this. Yes, Harrington's her last name here. So Gaia Harrington, a sustainability and dynamic systems analysis lead at KPMG in the US, did her master's thesis. In fact, all she did was she went back to this data set and said, is it still true? Does it still hold? And she went and got all these new data points and says, were their predictions correct? And are we still on track for that? Short answer is it was incredibly accurate. We are incredibly on track. The one variation that we are not tracking on is the MIT publication had a version of reality where the world woke up, realized that we need to take care of our planet, focus on sustainable business and economic models and sustainable planetary resources, and said, yes, we're going to do something about this and we'll turn the tide. Turns out we didn't do that. And we actually did business as usual, and we continued to consume like crazy. And here we are today. Fascinating thing, totally worth checking out. It's good data in here. It talks about this idea of comprehensive, if we bring all this new technology, what does the world look like? If we just kind of don't have these big innovations, what does the world look like? It took 10 minutes to read. And then, of course, links to all the original sources underneath it. So, that's all I want to say. The steep decline is set to 2040. So if you have any plans, now is a good time to get on them. Okay.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah, of course.
Not that people need to hear I feel like I was talking about like existential risk. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, and why it's important for us to wake up like cybersecurity should be like a core component in like everything, and it shouldn't be one of these top risks like this, right? That's all. I wanted to connect those dots. Like I previously made a comment about this in another show. Yeah, yep. And I think that at the tail end of the article, the last paragraph, the best available data suggests that what we decide over the next 10 years will determine the long-term fate of human civilization. Although the odds are on a knife edge, that there's social good and governance that we should be optimistic about, and I believe that to be true. And I also believe that we can't predict, much like we have never been able to predict, the advancements in technology and what those unlock for us from I don't want to say like a complete reversal standpoint, but like what we may be able to prevent from we're modeling this level of like environmental destruction, but insert these three key advancements in whatever, right? Like fossil fuel, eradicating that or reducing it to basically nothing, consumption, and sustainable like growing agriculture, whatever those things are, right? I just think that there are things that we haven't necessarily taken into the full context of these models, and that I would never expect somebody in 1972 to ever be like, like we have space billionaires now, right? Like I don't know, maybe they could have predicted that. I guess they could have.
Let's not talk about that.
We'll leave it at
that. But okay, so I agree with you that we need to really have these conversations about existential risk. But I think the point out, and I think 2 weeks ago we talked about this. Cybersecurity plays a role in ensuring the technologies we bring to de-risk these existential risks, yes, they themselves would not bring us more vulnerable in the process.
Yes,
and I think that is our if our industry has a mandate to serve humanity, it is that there are folks who are going to bring technology solutions to solve these existential risks that we have. It is our job to make sure that they are well guarded and well defended, so we can get the benefits from the risk reduction of like making sure people have food and clean water and election systems that work and people aren't throwing into chaos. Like, we should have integrity in those systems. It is our job to make sure they are protected. That's our part of this story. Yeah, I don't think you disagree. I don't disagree with you. Yeah, we're on the same page.
Well, I mean, like 10 years ago, I don't think we would be having this type of conversation about cybersecurity and the importance of it in making sure that we have the right technology to help us succeed as a society, like in election systems and health systems and all the things. I feel like the pandemic has exacerbated that to a certain extent. But I think we're at this really interesting inflection point as a global society. Not just a community of security experts, but I think it shines a light on the importance of security and the work that we do on the day to day, and why we need to continue to invest in it. And I just think that it only is favorable. It doesn't detract.
So I will say to everyone here, we left on some pretty heavy topics about existential risk here, but there is a sense of hope. Like, everyone in our industry has a key role to play in helping fix this problem, right? We get to support and defend the solutions that de-risk us. So please throw your thoughts in the comments. I'll be watching this throughout the day and picking up the conversation as the day progresses. And remember that we generally have these every Friday. I think we're skipping next Friday because I've got a family event to take care of on Friday morning. But we should be back in 2 Fridays' time across that. So I look forward to seeing everybody on LinkedIn. And just obviously, if you've got any questions or you want access to those links to the articles I showed, but maybe didn't link in the show notes, let me know. We've got them all here for you. Okay. So on that, we leave you in a happy tone. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your weekend.
I don't know,
James. Any parting words?
Yeah. I wish I had a good joke to leave everybody on, but I have a dad joke that I read out of the Medium back on not Medium, the Daily Brew. Come on, man. We were talking about existential risk, and I just got my electric bill, so it's topical for at least me. And the joke is, if you ever want to talk about why my air conditioning bill is so high, the door is always open. Okay.
Oh my God. Okay. With that, we would love you and leave you. We will see you in a couple of weeks. See you all on LinkedIn. Bye.